When history decides to surprise the world, it does so in ways that defy expectation. Today we are living through one such moment, a moment that will be remembered in Africa and beyond. The announcement has stunned the global stage. Ibrahim Traoré, Africa's youngest head of state, has been nominated for the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. A name that just a few years ago was unknown outside his nation now echoes across continents. How did a young soldier from Burkina Faso rise from the shadows of military barracks to the heights of international recognition? How did a man who took power during a time of war become a symbol of peace? To answer these questions, we must look not just at the man, but at the movement he represents, the rebirth of a continent's pride, the reclaiming of sovereignty, and the redefinition of peace itself. Ibrahim Traoré's story is not written in privilege. It is a story born of struggle, his own and that of his nation. Burkina Faso, a landlocked country in West Africa, has known hardship for decades. Once a colony under the French Empire, it fought to free itself from the chains of colonialism, only to find those chains replaced by others: economic dependency, foreign interference, and the scourge of terrorism. For years, the Sahel region has bled under the blade of extremist violence. Villages burned, farmers abandoned their lands, and millions were displaced. In Burkina Faso, despair became a language spoken in every home. It was in this darkness that Ibrahim Traoré emerged, not as a politician hungry for power, but as a soldier unwilling to watch his country die. In 2022, at the age of 34, he took a bold step that many saw as unthinkable. He led a popular military takeover, ousting a government that had failed to protect its people. To some, it was a coup. To others, it was a rescue mission. To Traoré, it was a duty to stop the bleeding, to give his nation a chance at life. But what makes this story extraordinary is not the takeover itself. History is full of coups in Africa, most of them leading to tyranny, corruption, and ruin. What makes Traoré different is what came after. He did not seize power to enrich himself or to serve foreign masters. He seized power to serve his people, to restore dignity, and to challenge the very structures that had kept his country weak for decades. From his first speech as president of the transition, Traoré's message was clear. Burkina Faso will no longer bow to the West. He said it not with arrogance, but with conviction. For too long, African nations have been treated as clients, not equal. For too long, peace in Africa has been defined by foreign troops stationed on African soil, by agreements written in foreign capitals, and by systems that perpetuate dependency. Traoré rejected this model. One of his first acts was to demand the departure of French military forces from Burkina Faso. For years, France claimed to fight terrorism in the Sahel through Operation Barkhane, and later the Takuba Task Force. Yet violence only worsened. Entire provinces fell under the control of armed groups. People began to ask, if foreign troops are here to protect us, why are we less safe than before? Traoré gave voice to that frustration. He told the world that Burkina Faso would take its destiny into its own hands. French troops left, not amid chaos, but amid a new confidence that security cannot be outsourced, that sovereignty cannot be shared. But removing foreign troops was only the first step. Traoré understood that sovereignty is hollow without strength. And so, he rebuilt the foundations of national defense. He mobilized the people through the creation of the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, the VDP. This was not a mercenary force, it was a people's army. Farmers, traders, students all came forward to defend their land. In less than a year, tens of thousands joined the ranks. They were not fighting for paychecks or politics, they were fighting for survival, for dignity, for the right to live free. At the same time, Traoré modernized the army. He knew that courage without capacity is not enough. He allocated nearly $1 billion to acquire advanced weapons, armored vehicles, and drones, not from those who sought to control Burkina Faso, but from partners who respected its sovereignty. Russian military advisors, Turkish drones, and homegrown initiatives began to shape a new doctrine, an African army for African security. Yet Traoré's vision goes beyond guns and soldiers. He knows that peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of justice, opportunity, and dignity. And here lies the heart of why his Nobel Peace Prize nomination. For too long, Africa has been told that peace means accepting poverty in exchange for aid. accepting foreign bases in exchange for stability, accepting humiliation in exchange for crumbs from the global table. Traore said no. He argues that true peace cannot exist without sovereignty, and sovereignty cannot exist without self-reliance. He revived the spirit of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader of the 1980s, who once said, "He who feeds you controls you." Traore calls on Burkinabe farmers to return to their fields, on citizens to consume local products, on businesses to free themselves from foreign monopolies. He made Faso Danfani, the traditional woven cloth, a symbol of pride, urging officials to wear it instead of imported suits. These acts, small in appearance, carry a message as powerful as any law that freedom begins with identity. Beyond borders, Traore has become a voice for Pan-African unity. He helped create the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, alongside Mali and Niger. This is more than a security pact. It is a political declaration that Africa can stand without Western tutelage. The AES is planning joint military forces, economic integration, and even a new currency to replace the CFA franc, a colonial relic that still ties African economies to Paris. This alliance is shaking the foundations of old power structures. It is inspiring hope among millions who dream of an Africa united, not as a slogan but as a strategy. And so, the world asks, why a Nobel Peace Prize for a man at war? The answer lies in redefining what peace means. Peace is not passive. Peace is not silence in the face of oppression. Peace is the fight for justice. Nelson Mandela once said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, it's inspiring others to move beyond it." Mandela himself fought, was imprisoned, and yet won the Nobel Peace Prize because he sought freedom for his people. Today, Ibrahim Traoré walks a similar path. He is not honored for war, but for the vision of a peace rooted in sovereignty, dignity, and equality. Of course, his journey is not without challenges. Burkina Faso still suffers, attacks continue, and innocent lives are lost. The economy is under strain. Critics warn of creeping authoritarianism as elections are postponed. Some fear that new alliances could create new dependencies. These concerns are real, and they cannot be ignored. A Nobel Prize, if it comes, will not erase these struggles, but it will recognize something profound, that Africa's fight for true independence is not over, and that this fight is not incompatible with peace. It is the path to peace. Imagine what this means for Africa's youth. For too long they have seen leaders who cling to power, who bow to foreign interests, who kill dreams instead of building them. Now they see a young man barely in his 30s, standing before the world, unashamed of his identity, unafraid to challenge the old order. They see a leader who speaks their language, who wears their cloth, who dares to say what many only whisper, that Africa's time has come. If Traoré wins the Nobel Peace Prize, it will not just honor one man, it will honor every Burkinabe who picked up a tool instead of fleeing, every African who refused to accept that dependency is destiny, every voice that believes sovereignty is not a privilege but a right. It will send a message from Oslo to Ouagadougou that the world sees, the world hears, and the world recognizes Africa's struggle for justice as a struggle for peace. So tonight, as we reflect on this extraordinary nomination, let us ask, what does peace mean to us? Is it a fragile quiet purchased by submission, or is it the roar of a people rising to reclaim their dignity? Ibrahim Traoré has given his answer, not with empty words, but with bold actions. He has risked everything, not for glory, but for a future where his children and all of Africa's children can walk free on their own soil without fear. If the Nobel Peace Prize is meant to honor those who reshape the world's understanding of peace, then Ibrahim Traoré deserves his place among its laureates. For he reminds us of a timeless truth: peace is not given, it is earned. It is built with courage, sustained by justice, and defended by those who refuse to bow. The world is watching, history is writing, and Africa, yes, Africa, is rising. When history moves, it moves without apology. It moves with a force that sweeps aside the predictions of experts, the arrogance of empires, and the doubts of skeptics. Today, we are witnesses to one of those rare moments, a moment when the impossible becomes possible, when the overlooked rises to the forefront, and when a single name ignites debates from Ouagadougou to Oslo: Ibrahim Traoré. The announcement sent shockwaves across continents. Africa's youngest leader, a man who took power through a coup in a time of national collapse, has been nominated for the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. Some call it a triumph, others call it a paradox. How can a soldier, a captain in fatigues, stand among the giants of peace? How can a leader engaged in war be a candidate for an award synonymous with harmony? The answer lies in redefining what peace truly means. For too long, peace has been portrayed as the mere absence of conflict. But the truth, the hard, undeniable truth is this: peace is not silence, peace is not submission, peace is justice, peace is dignity, peace is sovereignty, and without these, there can be no lasting peace, only oppression disguised as order. Ibrahim Traoré did not enter politics through the doors of privilege or the corridors of diplomacy. He came from the dust, from the ranks of an army stretched thin and worn down by a war it was never prepared to fight. He came from a country where the cries of mothers mourning their sons became the soundtrack of everyday life. He came from a nation that had been abandoned by its own elites, by its supposed allies, by a world that only remembered Burkina Faso when it needed gold or labor. To understand why this nomination matters, we must revisit the story of Burkina Faso, a nation whose name means the land of upright people. A name given by a visionary, Thomas Sankara, who dreamed of an Africa free from the shackles of foreign domination. Sankara declared, "We must dare to invent the future." And for 4 brief years, he did just that, until the bullets of betrayal silenced him in 1987. Since then, the dream of Sankara lived on in whispers, in murals, in the hearts of a people waiting for a new dawn. That dawn came in the most unexpected form: a 36-year-old captain named Ibrahim Traoré. When he seized power in September 2022, Burkina Faso was not a nation, it was a battlefield. Armed groups roamed freely, imposing their rule on vast territories. Villages vanished overnight in flames. Millions fled their homes. Foreign troops patrolled the land under the banner of counterterrorism, yet the bloodshed only deepened. The country was collapsing. And then came Traoré with words that cut through despair like a blade. "If we must die for this country to live, then we will die standing, not kneeling." This was not rhetoric, this was a vow that Burkina Faso would no longer crawl in the dust of dependency, no longer beg for security while surrendering its soul. From the first day, Traoré made choices that defied the script written for African leaders. He told foreign forces to leave, not out of hatred, but out of principle. He said what many thought but feared to utter: "We will no longer bow to the West." And the echo of those words traveled across Africa, igniting a fire in hearts long numbed by submission. But sovereignty is not proclaimed, it is built. Traoré knew this, so he did what few dared. He turned citizens into sentinels. The volunteers for the defense of the homeland were born, not mercenaries, not conscripts, but patriots who chose to stand between their villages and the vultures of terror. Men and women who traded plows for rifles, classrooms for trenches, comfort for sacrifice. They did not fight for salaries, they fought for survival. And yet bravery without tools is suicide. Traoré transformed the army from a relic of yesterday into a force of tomorrow. Drones now patrol skies once owned by insurgents. Armored vehicles, many built locally, roll through regions that were once no-go zones. Soldiers trained not in foreign bases that treat Africa as an afterthought, but in programs designed for African realities. Still, Traoré knew something else. No nation fights alone. Terror crosses borders, so must resistance. And so was born the Alliance of Sahel States, a pact with Mali and Niger that shook the foundations of a region chained to old masters. Together they declared independence from Icho, as from the CFA franc, from dictates written in capitals thousands of miles away. They said, "We will build our own future." And in that moment, the dream of Pan-Africanism, buried under decades of betrayal, breathed again. Now let us confront the question that burns in the minds of many. How can a man at war win the Nobel Peace Prize? The answer lies in a truth too often ignored. Peace is not given, it is taken. It is forged in struggle. It is born from the courage to say no when the world expects you to bow. Traoré's war is not a war for conquest, it is a war for liberation, a war to make peace possible in a land where peace was murdered by terror and foreign hypocrisy. Does this mean his hands are clean? No. Does this mean his methods are beyond question? No leader is beyond question. His postponement of elections raises debates. His reliance on volunteer fighters risks abuses. His pivot to new partners creates new dependencies, even as it ends old ones. These are realities that cannot be romanticized, but the Nobel Peace Prize has never been about perfection. It has been about the pursuit of a higher ideal against impossible odds. Consider this. When Nelson Mandela received the Nobel in 1993, he was once branded a terrorist. When Yasser Arafat stood on that stage, his hands were not unstained. History is complex. Peace is not a flower that blooms in calm gardens. It is a tree that grows in the cracks of battlefields. Traoré's nomination is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about Africa reclaiming its voice. For too long, the continent has been lectured about governance by those who looted its wealth. It has been told to embrace democracy while being stripped of the resources that make democracy possible. It has been sold the illusion of peace while being trapped in dependency. Traoré tears that illusion apart. He says to Africa's youth, "Your destiny is yours, take it." And Africa's youth are listening. In Dakar, in Bamako, in Kinshasa, his name is whispered with hope, shouted with pride. Murals of Traoré rise beside those of Sankara. Songs bear his name. For a generation that grew up watching leaders bow and beg, he is proof that courage still lives. And that perhaps is why the world is uneasy. For when a man refuses to kneel, he inspires others to rise. But let us not deceive ourselves. The road ahead is paved with fire. The enemies of this vision are many: terrorists with guns, elites with greed, foreign powers with agendas, and the greatest enemy of all time. Will Traoré remain the servant of the people or succumb to the disease of power that devoured so many before him? Will the alliance he built endure, or will it fracture under pressure? These questions linger, heavy and unanswered. Yet, in this moment, one truth shines: the mere fact that a young African leader who speaks of sovereignty, who challenges empires, who arms his people to defend their dignity, can stand as a candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize. That is history rewriting itself before our eyes. If Oslo calls his name, it will not erase the blood on Burkina Faso's soil. It will not end the war tomorrow, but it will send a thunderclap across the world, a message that peace cannot be defined by those who profit from war, that sovereignty is not a crime, that Africa's fight for freedom is a fight for humanity itself. And so I ask, is Ibrahim Traoré a perfect man? No. Is he a peacemaker in the classic sense? Perhaps not. But is he a builder of a future where peace is rooted in justice, where dignity replaces dependency, where Africa rises as a partner, not a pawn? Yes, and for that his name deserves to be spoken in Oslo. For peace is not given. Peace is not granted by signatures in Geneva. Peace is seized by those who dare to stand when the world demands they kneel. Traoré dared, and in daring he gave hope to millions. So let the critics cry paradox, let the cynics sneer. For every sneer there is a child in Burkina Faso who dreams again. For every doubt there is a mother who believes her son did not die in vain. For every headline of shock there is a whisper in Africa's wind: the age of submission is ending. The age of sovereignty is here. When history decides to turn the page, it does not ask permission. It does not wait for those who cling to power. It simply moves swiftly, unexpectedly, and with a force that cannot be ignored. Today we find ourselves living in one of those moments, a moment when Africa shakes the world, when a single name sparks debates from Ouagadougou to Oslo: Ibrahim Traoré. The announcement struck like lightning. Africa's youngest head of state, a soldier who rose in the heat of crisis, a man often described as a revolutionary rather than a politician, nominated for the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. To some, it is a triumph, to others a contradiction. How, they ask, can a man at war be a candidate for peace? The answer lies in a truth too long ignored. Peace is not the absence of war, it is the presence of justice. It is sovereignty, it is dignity, and without these, peace is nothing more than a beautiful lie. To understand why this nomination matters, we must journey back to the soul of a nation called Burkina Faso, the the land of upright people. A name given by Thomas Sankara, who once declared, "He who feeds you controls you." For decades that control defined Africa. Aid came with chains, development came with dependence, and Burkina Faso, like many African nations, bent under the weight of foreign dominance. Sankara fought to break those chains. "We must dare to invent the future," he said. And for 4 years he did, until the bullets of betrayal cut him down. His dream was buried, but not dead. It lived in whispers, in murals, in the hearts of the young who refused to forget. That dream found a voice in 2022, in a man named Ibrahim Traoré. He was not a politician groomed in foreign halls of power. He was a soldier, born from the dust, forged in struggle, scarred by the failures of a system that allowed terror to consume the land. By the time Traoré stepped forward, Burkina Faso was bleeding. Armed groups burned villages, millions fled their homes, farmers abandoned their fields, foreign troops patrolled under banners of peace, yet the violence only grew. A nation that once walked proud now crawled. And then came a voice that did not whisper but roared, "If we must die for this country to live, then we will die standing, not kneeling." Those words were not spoken in a palace, they were spoken in the heart of a revolution. From the very first day, Traoré defied the script written for African leaders. He told the old powers, "We will no longer bow to the West," and the echo of those words shook capitals across the globe, because they knew this was not rhetoric, this was rebellion against an entire order. But rebellion without rebuilding is chaos. Traoré understood that sovereignty is not declared, it is built, so he acted. He mobilized citizens into the volunteers for the defense of the homeland, ordinary people who chose to defend their land when the state was too weak to protect them. Farmers became fighters, teachers became sentinels, women too stood in the line of fire. They fought not for paychecks, but for survival. Yet courage without means is suicide. Traoré began what many thought impossible, the modernization of Burkina Faso's defense forces. Drones now sweep skies once ruled by fear. Armored vehicles, some built in African soil, roll across terrains once abandoned. He turned the army from a relic of yesterday into a force of tomorrow. And then he did something even bolder. He built alliances that history will remember. Alongside Mali and Niger, Traoré formed the Alliance of Sahel States. 3 nations, bound by blood and destiny, said to the world, "We will write our own future." They broke from ECOWAS, from colonial currencies, from dictates written in European capitals. For the first time in decades, the dream of Pan-Africanism, spoken by Kwame Nkrumah, "Africa must unite or perish," was more than a slogan, it was a strategy. Now the question lingers, can a man leading a nation at war win the Nobel Peace Prize? Critics scoff, they point to battles, to casualties, to extended transitions. They ask, where is the peace in war? The answer comes from history. Peace is not born in comfort, it is born in struggle. When Nelson Mandela walked free after 27 years in prison, the world embraced him as a saint. Yet once they called him a terrorist. When Patrice Lumumba spoke of freedom, they branded him a danger. When Sankara stood against imperialism, they called him a radical. Peace is not soft, peace is hard. It is forged in fire, in sacrifice, in the refusal to surrender dignity for survival. Traoré's war is not a war for conquest, it is a war for liberation, a war to make peace possible in a land where peace was murdered by terror and betrayal. Does this make him flawless? No. Does this make him beyond question? Absolutely not. His postponement of elections raises concerns. His reliance on civilian fighters risks abuse. His pivot to new partners creates new dependencies, even as it ends old ones. These realities must be faced with honesty. But the Nobel Peace Prize has never honored perfection. It honors those who fight for the possibility of peace when all odds stand against them. And here lies the heart of this moment. Ibrahim Traoré's nomination is not only about Burkina Faso, it is about the dignity of a continent long denied its voice. It is about young Africans who grew up watching their leaders bow and beg, and now see one who stands and says, "Our destiny will not be dictated from abroad." In Dakar and Bamako, in Nairobi, murals bloom with his face. Songs bear his name. For a generation robbed of heroes, he is proof that courage still breathes. And that, perhaps, is what terrifies the old order most. Not his weapons, not his words, but his example. For when one man refuses to kneel, millions begin to rise. But let us not romanticize the road ahead. The fires of war still burn. The enemies of this vision are many. Terrorists with guns, elites with greed, foreign powers with agendas, and the greatest enemy of all, power itself. Will Traore remain the servant of his people, or will he become what he once fought? Will the alliance of Sahel states endure, or will it fracture under pressure? These questions hang heavy. Yet even with these uncertainties, one truth stands unshaken: the very fact that a young African leader who speaks of sovereignty, who defies empires, who mobilizes his people to defend their land, can stand as a candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize, means history is changing before our eyes. If Oslo calls his name, it will not erase the blood on Burkina Faso's soil. It will not end the war overnight, but it will send a thunderclap across the earth. A message that sovereignty is not a crime, that Africa's fight for freedom is not terrorism, that true peace is impossible without justice. As Patrice Lumumba once said, history will one day have its say. Perhaps this is that day. And so I ask you, is Ibrahim Traoré perfect? No. Is he a peacemaker in the way the world expects? Perhaps not. But is he a man who dares to dream of a peace built on freedom, a peace born from justice, a peace rooted in dignity? Yes, and for that his name deserves to echo in Oslo, because peace is not given, it is seized. And in seizing it, Ibrahim Traoré did more than shock the world. He reminded it that Africa is rising, and nothing can stop a people determined to live free. As the African proverb says, until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Today the lion has begun to write, and this nomination, this single act, may be the roar that shakes the silence. For too long, Africa's story has been written by those who sought to control it. From the days of colonization to the age of globalization, the chains of dependency have not disappeared. They have only changed shape. They now come as foreign aid with strings attached, as currencies controlled by outside powers, as military bases built in the name of security, but designed to keep Africa in submission. For decades, Burkina Faso, like many African nations, bore these invisible shackles. But history tells us no chain lasts forever. Today, under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso has declared to the world the era of submission is over. With unwavering courage, Traoré has stood before the old powers and said the words they never expected to hear: we will no longer bow to the West. What does this mean? It means that decisions about Burkina Faso will no longer be made in Paris, in Washington, or in the boardrooms of global corporations. It means that the nation's resources, its gold, its land, its future, will no longer be looted under the cover of cooperation. It means that Burkinabe blood will no longer pay the price for foreign interests. Breaking colonial chains is not just about removing foreign troops or rejecting unfair treaties. It is about a complete transformation of mindset. It is about economic sovereignty, ending dependence on the CFA franc, building industries that serve Burkinabe needs, and investing in local production. It is about cultural revival, teaching our children that they are heirs of dignity, not subjects of humiliation. And above all, it is about defending our land with our own hands, for no nation is truly free if it cannot protect its people. This fight is not easy. The pressures are immense: sanctions, propaganda, isolation. These are the weapons of the old order. But as Thomas Sankara once said, you cannot kill ideas, and the idea of true independence has returned, stronger than ever, carried by a generation that refuses to be slaves in the 20s. Burkina Faso's stand under Traoré is more than national. It is continental. It is a signal to all of Africa. The chains can be broken, and when they break, they do not break in silence. They break with the roar of a people, reclaiming their destiny.